The order never came. On June 22, 1941, the Wehrmacht stood along 1,000 miles of frontier, engines warm, maps unfolded, and waited for a signal that would never arrive. Instead, a single teletype machine in the Wolf's Lair clattered out a two-word directive that no one expected. Stand down. That was the moment the world tilted, because Hitler, for once, had listened to his generals. He had read the history books. He had stared at the vastness of Russia on the map and seen Napoleon's ghost staring back, and he made a choice that would reshape the century. He would not invade. What unfolds next is not simply a Germany that wins the war. It is a world where the worst instincts of the 20th century go unchecked, where the balance of power collapses into a single predatory fist. Within weeks of the cancelled invasion, the Luftwaffe shifted south. Malta, the unsinkable aircraft carrier of the Mediterranean, fell in August 1941 after a relentless bombing campaign that never had to divert a single squadron to Russia. The British garrison on the island surrendered not to starvation, but to the sheer weight of German steel. From the smoking ruins of Valletta, German panzer divisions rolled east toward Egypt. The Suez Canal, the lifeline of the British Empire, was severed by Christmas. London knew what was coming. Churchill had gambled everything on America and on the Soviets holding the line. But the Soviets were not holding. They were watching, waiting, selling oil to Germany from Baku right up until the moment the Wehrmacht's fuel trucks pulled into Ploesti. And America? Pearl Harbor never happened. Without the German invasion of Russia, Japan felt no need to secure its northern flank. Instead of striking south into the Pacific, Tokyo negotiated a non-aggression pact with Washington and focused on China. The United States stayed out of the European war entirely. Britain stood alone, and it was not enough. Operation Sea Lion had been a bluff in our timeline. But in this one, by the spring of 1942, the Kriegsmarine had cleared the English Channel of any meaningful opposition. U-boats had starved the island of fuel and food. The RAF, outnumbered 5-1, had been ground down over the Mediterranean. When the first German landing craft touched the beaches of Kent, there were no Spitfires overhead. There was only fog and the sound of diesel engines. The British government evacuated to Canada, but the people of London stayed. They watched German soldiers march down the Mall, past a Buckingham Palace that now flew a swastika. And in the quiet that followed, something worse than war settled over Europe, a peace built on terror. The Eastern Front, which in our world consumed the Wehrmacht's best divisions, never opened. Instead, Hitler turned his attention to the resources he had always coveted, the oil of the Caucasus, the grain of Ukraine. He didn't need to invade Russia to take them, he just needed Stalin to panic. And Stalin did. In July 1942, convinced that a Nazi victory in the West meant the USSR would be next, he ordered a preemptive strike into Eastern Europe. The Red Army, untested by the brutal losses of 1941, rolled into Poland with 3 million men. It was the largest offensive in history, and it failed catastrophically. The Wehrmacht, fully rested and fully supplied, had been waiting for exactly this. Within 6 months, German counterattacks had pushed the Soviets back to the Dnieper. Stalin sued for peace. He lost Ukraine, the Baltics, and a buffer of territory that stretched to the outskirts of Leningrad. And so by 1944, the map of Europe looked like a claw closing around a bleeding heart. From the Atlantic to the Urals, one flag flew. On the other side of the ocean, America watched, terrified and silent. But the war was not over. It had simply changed shape. In a secret laboratory in the Harz Mountains, Werner Heisenberg's team, now fully funded and no longer competing with a desperate army for resources, had solved the neutron chain reaction by early 1943. By 1945, they had built the first atomic device. It was tested not in the desert of New Mexico, but on an uninhabited island in the Baltic Sea. The flash was seen in Copenhagen. Then came the decision, where to drop it? London was already occupied, its spirit broken but not extinguished. Churchill's government in exile had moved to Ottawa, preparing for a liberation that would never come. Hitler chose to demonstrate his power on the city that had defied him longest, Moscow. On the morning of May 1, 1945, a German bomber with a single nuclear bomb flew east. The detonation erased the Kremlin, most of the city center, and any remaining illusions that the old world could be restored. The Soviet Union collapsed into chaos. What was left of the Red Army surrendered unconditionally. And in the void, the Nazis began their final project, the depopulation of Eastern Europe, the resettlement of the East with German colonists, the systematic erasure of entire peoples. This is the world that almost was. But history is not linear. In the shadows, the American Manhattan Project had continued, slower but determined. By 1947, the United States had its own bomb. The standoff that followed was not the Cold War we know. It was colder, closer to the brink, and fought between two powers that shared no language, no history, no common enemy. For decades, the world balanced between Berlin and Washington, each side waiting for the other to blink. There is a letter that survives from this timeline. A German corporal stationed in London in 1943 wrote home to his mother in Bavaria. He described the English rain, the silence, the way the citizens would not meet his eyes. He said, "I thought we would be heroes. Instead, we are ghosts guarding a graveyard." That letter was never sent. It was found years later among his belongings. He had died in a bombing raid, not by the British, but by a faction of the German resistance that tried and failed to stop the nightmare. In the end, the lesson of this timeline is not that Hitler was unstoppable. It is that history's hinges are fragile. A single decision, a single hesitation, a single history lesson learned can tip the world into darkness. We live in a reality where Barbarossa was launched, where the Eastern Front bled the Wehrmacht white, where the Allies landed at Normandy and Berlin fell to the Red Army. We live in a reality where the bomb was built but never used against a city. If this story unsettles you, good, it should, because it is a reminder that the world we inherited is not inevitable. It is the product of countless choices, each one a razor's edge. And the only way to keep it is to remember exactly how close we came to losing it. If you enjoyed this exploration